Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Open Space Inventory webinar. We are just going to give this a couple more minutes to make sure everyone filters in. Alrighty, looks like we may have leveled off. Again, thank you everyone so much for joining us. My name is Christine. I'll introduce our other hosts in a moment. This is the Regional Open Space Inventory presentation from the Naugatuck+Valley Council of Governments. And if we go to the next slide, I just have a couple of quick housekeeping things. So there should be a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You can open that and type questions to us at any time. At the end of the presentation, we will set aside time to answer your questions, and staff may potentially also answer them in real time in the feature. For folks who are here for your AICP CM credit, the number on the screen is your credential, or you can just search Open Space Inventory, or I believe it's listed under Connecticut chapter of American Planning Association, and this counts for your sustainability and resiliency credit. Next slide, please. So that being said, I'd like to introduce our team. Everyone here today worked very hard over the course of 2 years to add a different sort of genre of expertise to putting together this inventory. We have Aaron Budris, our Environmental Planning Director, Tom Doherty, Environmental Planner and Record Researcher Extraordinaire, Rich Crowther, our Geographic Information Science and Technology Coordinator who did the mapping, and myself, another Environmental Planner. And finally, before we really jump into this, I wanted to mention this, really there's two sort of deliverables from the inventory. We have a report and guide, which Tom is going to go over, and we have the open space viewer, the map itself, which Rich is going to go over. So we'd encourage everybody here now to go to this website that you see, NVCOGCT.gov/OSI. I can put that in the chat for folks. We encourage you to play with these resources and try to follow along as we go through our presentation, and hopefully visit them again afterwards. We do acknowledge that for some folks, you may be in the Naugatuck Valley region, and this will be super applicable, and hopefully you'll be using these again and again. For other folks who are joining us from different parts of Connecticut or even different parts of the US, we hope that you'll find this to be a really interesting case study, and you can take back the parts of it that resonate with you, and hopefully make your own open space inventory. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Christine. So as Christine mentioned, we have folks on the call here from far and wide. So we thought we would sort of introduce ourselves a little bit. So we work for the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments. We're a regional planning organization that covers 19 municipalities in West Central Connecticut. Waterbury is our sort of center city. We're responsible for regional planning efforts like the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. We also assist municipalities with their own municipal planning efforts. So, from folks outside of Connecticut, we like to say we sort of fill the role that county governments fill in the rest of the country, although we have no taxation authority. So, we do a lot of the things that county governments do elsewhere. We're a really geographically and demographically diverse region, even though we're sort of geographically kind of small. We have a couple really big urban centers like Bristol and Waterbury. We also have some very rural communities like Bethlehem and Woodbury, and a lot of sort of suburban communities in between. So very diverse region. We also have a lot of diverse open space in our region, and that's what we're here to talk about. I might be preaching to the choir, but open space is really critical to the health and well-being of not only plants and animals, but to people as well. So on the screen here are just some examples that I think really highlight some of the benefits that open space provides and why we think protecting open space is so important. So open spaces can protect prime agricultural lands and local food sources, and with it, the rural community, like Gustafson's Farm in Watertown. In our region, we're sort of fortunate that the federal government took on a huge construction effort in the 60s and 70s to help protect the Naugatuck River from flooding, like it did in 1955. So we have federally managed open space properties that help protect our region from flooding with flood control dams, like Hopbrook Lake which is actually in Waterbury, Middlebury, and Naugatuck. Open spaces can protect drinking water. So the open space and the protected land around drinking water reservoirs, like the Wigwam and Morris reservoirs on the screen, really can help protect drinking water supply. Open spaces can preserve local history, like at the Bellamy Faraday House and Garden in Bethlehem. It can provide recreational opportunities, like the sports complex and Naugatuck River Greenway Trail at Linden Park in Naugatuck, and the Community House Park in Southbury. It can provide space for community gatherings and festivals, like the really successful Earth Day that is held annually at Hollow Park in Woodbury. And it provides access to natural resources in urban areas, like at the very first public Naugatuck River access area in Waterbury at Platt Park, and the trails at Barnes Nature Center in Bristol. So successful planning for open space and in general, it really requires good open space data. So, understanding where and what is protected from development is really important to provide accurate insights into land use, zoning, and development potential or likelihood. We've all seen properties that we sort of assumed were open space be developed. So it's really important to know what is and is not protected. It's critical for environmental protection in that it helps identify gaps in protection of sensitive ecological areas like wetlands or wildlife habitats. It's important for community health and equity. Having the right data supports equitable access to parks and green spaces and can help ensure protection of drinking water. It's really important for climate resilience and adaptation as well. It helps guide implementation of green infrastructure to mitigate flooding and urban heat island effects. And, the benefits from open spaces don't stop at political boundaries. So, doing this sort of data collection and collecting this information at a regional or sort of super regional scale really makes a lot of sense. So what makes good open space information? Well, we obviously want to know where the open spaces are, but we want to know what it's used for, how large they are, whether they're contiguous or not with other open spaces or protected land, who owns the land, or if there's an easement on it, who holds the easement. Is public access allowed? And I guess the really important one is it legally protected from future development? And if so, what kind of protection? Is it a full or partial? Is all of the parcel or part of it protected? And where can we find this information in the land use records? So we were fortunate in the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments to have a pretty good inventory of open space before we started this project. We've done work over the past several decades, helping towns map their open space and do mapping in general. So we did have a pretty good handle on open space, but that data was outdated. It was inconsistent. It was full of assumptions. There are towns saying that things were protected when we really didn't have the proof that they were protected. So, we had good bones, but we had a lot of gaps to fill. And we needed funding to try to figure out, what all of that data is. So we applied in 2022 for the fiscal year 23 congressionally directed spending to fund a comprehensive update of our open space data. We received $92,000, which is about half of what we asked for. That funding was administered by the U.S. Forest Service. And while we sort of initially thought we were going to hire a consultant to do all of the land records research that needed to be done, we ultimately decided that we had the expertise in-house to do it. And we did it with NVCOG staff. And it was really a multidisciplinary project. We involved staff from the Mapping, Data, and Technology Department, the Environmental Planning Department, and the Community Planning Department. And we had, big meetings all the time with a bunch of staff from all of NVCOG, which is actually kind of fun. And the project consisted of months and months of painstaking parcel by parcel research in record rooms across the region and online, and involved close coordination with municipal officials, land trusts, and other conservation partners. We used a data schema or template that was based on one that was developed by Sustainable CT. So that template's already being used across the state by a bunch of towns collecting information about their open space. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and using that common template will allow for a compilation of that data beyond just our regional boundaries. So the fields that we collected data for are on the screen here. The ones with the asterisks are information that we collected for every single parcel. The ones without are, might not have been applicable to all of the properties, or just might not have been available for some of them. The goal was really to fill in our data gaps with a focus on the protection status. So, is it protected? What's the protection mechanism? There's an easement, who holds it? And we're really interested in being able to cite, where that information is, so that future researchers could go back and verify or sort of build on what we've already begun here. So now, at the end of almost 2 years of work, we've compiled all that data into a report and an online mapping tool. And now I'm going to hand it off to the rest of the team to sort of discuss how you all can access and use that information that we collected.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. So yeah, I'll just be going over the various sections of our project report and explaining how each section can be useful to open space stakeholders reading this report, not only in our region, but the whole state as well. We'll start the overview with the report with the summary. This section reviews the process, methodology, and findings of this project. As we go over the report, it's important to know that the overall purpose of the report is to help officials, policymakers, and conservationists understand the state of open space in the Naugatuck Valley and help plan for the future of open space in the region. This section also provides open space statistics for the region. These statistics show the amount of protected and unprotected space for our region based on our methodology. This gives open space stakeholders a quick and valuable insight into the state of open space in their municipality. The Understanding Open Space portion of the report highlights the complexity of defining open space as well as its benefits, types, and protection mechanisms. Since there's not one straightforward definition of open space, it leaves room for different types of open space to be considered for this project. This section is a guide for stakeholders, helping them navigate the diverse considerations of open space. The benefits section provides the reader with an explanation of the number of benefits that open space can provide for their community, spanning beyond just environmental preservation, as Aaron mentioned earlier in the presentation. We felt that this was important to include in our report because it helps stakeholders and officials understand how important it is to preserve these spaces for the benefit of their community. We then explain the different types of open space in this report. This helps officials and organizations recognize the various properties that can be acquired for open space and the beneficial resources that these properties can provide. The types of open space considered in this project include agriculture, recreational cemeteries, parks, forests, historic land, drinking water, flood control land, and conservation properties. So we really, looked into a lot of different types of properties for this project. And then we go over to the types of protection that we researched. So we describe the various protection methods that can be placed on an open space property to ensure that it is protected in perpetuity. Most of the time, ownership type alone doesn't ensure that property will be preserved as open space. So it's important to recognize how an owner can place conservation protection when acquiring a property. The protection types included in our report are deed restrictions, conservation easements, open space within a subdivision, purchase of development rights, a transfer of development rights, and we also created another category of protection called municipal intent, which are properties that were identified as open space in a municipality's plan of conservation and development and municipally owned. Other protection considerations for this project include Public Act 490 properties, Class 1 and 2 water company land, and state and federal open space properties. So this begins our methodology section within the report. Scoping a project of this scale with limited examples to guide us was pretty challenging. Our 19 municipalities had hundreds of potential open space parcels, and we were the first organization in the state to perform an open space inventory of this scale and detail. So to manage time, our team had to make scoping decisions on what type of open space properties to include in our inventory and what information to research per parcel. Our methodology section outlines the types of open space we decided to include in our inventory, the resources we used to perform the research, and the key information we wanted to gather during our research. As stated in the understanding open space section of the report, there is no one definition of open space, so determining what types of properties we include in our inventory and their protection status required us to continually revisit our methodology. Okay. I'd also like to just briefly go over what we researched step by step so you can get a better idea of our research structure. So in phase 1, we contacted and retrieved any existing open space information from land trusts, municipal staff, and water companies. We also researched state and federal databases for additional properties. The second phase was to perform online research of our land records. This included property cards, maps, websites, and deeds. The key information that we were looking for during our research in the blue box on the right here was property owner, conservation protection status, the area of protected and unprotected open space in acres, and what the property is being used for. If we could not find this information online, we would visit the municipal land records in person. This is because some deeds and easements and maps were not available online. Once the research team gathered a municipality's open space information, we would internally review the information to ensure the identified properties would include our open space inventory and what protection status they should be given according to our protection criteria. We then handed it off in a finalized data to our GIS department to clean up the data and map the properties. All right, and then I also wanted to show this chart that's within the report, and it shows our protection criteria of open space properties and how we determined if they were protected. This is helpful to the reader because it simply provides our methodology for protection and all in one place. So as you can see, we have ownership at the top in black, and then the questions we asked during our research of these properties in green. And that determined our protection status of each property based on our criteria on the bottom in gray. And here are some key findings that we gathered during our overall research for open space. This includes number one, the complexity of determining protected open space due to lack of consistent definition and many types of open space. Number two, a uniform municipal open space reporting system would bring benefits to future open space tracking. Number three, many important open space properties are not legally protected and can be developed in the future. And number four, the quality of open space doesn't just mean adding green space. The function is very important as well. And then finally, we have in Appendix A of the report, we provide municipal open space profiles of the 19 towns in our region. Each municipality municipal profile includes open space statistics, an overview of their open space characteristics, and 3 unique open space properties. This section is great for stakeholders to find out more about open space in their own community. And to provide an example of that, the first municipal profile that we provide is for Ansonia, and you can see detailed information on open space, including land cover, protection percentage, and ownership. You'll also find a narrative that paints a picture of the uniqueness of the open space in that specific municipality. On the second page on the right here, you'll find the 3 featured open space properties that belong to Ansonia. These were chosen by our team based on recognizability, interesting protection mechanisms, unique environmental features, and regional importance. And so we did this with all the 19 towns in our municipalities, and we think this is, a great resource for our towns to have. And that's it for me. I will turn it over to Rich to discuss our inventory map. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to start the demonstration, a live demonstration of the application. So good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Crowley Jr., the GIS and Technology Coordinator for NVCOG. I manage the Mapping, Data, and Technology Department, which is responsible for mapping, spatial analytics, statistical analytics, and interactive visualizations for the organization, including the Open Space Viewer, as you see on your screen. The Open Space Viewer was built using the Esri Experience Builder platform, the version that comes with a standard ArcGIS Online account. I wanted to mention this as there is no custom coding to create this interactive map. So anyone with a standard license can recreate this if they wanted to. The viewer opens with the open space inventory at the regional scale and symbolized by whether it is protected or not. On the left is a set of filters, which will allow, which is the easiest way to explore the inventory. You can sort by town, and it will zoom to that town of interest. If it was protected or not, since it's already symbolized, I won't go over that. Who owns it? Click apply. So these are all the land trust properties. And the filters are also dynamic. So since in the Cheshire, all land trust land is either used for agriculture or conservation. So if we just do conservation, the agricultural lands disappear. And then to reset, just like all on all the filters. The filter also works with the open space inventory by ownership, which is a separate layer. It has the same information as the protected layer. So when you zoom in and we want to do research on an individual parcel, this information will pop up, shows all the content that we collected during the research process. In this layer list, you could also see layers by individual use. I'll zoom out a little bit. So this is all the open space in the region that's used for agriculture. Those are identified as cemeteries, flood control, and recreation. And then we also include the open space data that we started the process with. So you can see if there's a comparison. And one example of change is here where we actually had the easement map. So the easement shown at this development shrink a little bit, but it matches the map that the records research shows. We also include overlay information for those who want to dive deeper into open space. We include natural diversity database information, aquifer protection areas, farmland soils by different types, and then EJ groups. And then we also identified parcels that have 490 protection. I know this looks a little messy, but I wanted to show, there's the legend tool and it shows you everything that's symbolized on the map. And then we also have a base map gallery selector, so it will change the background reference information if you deem necessary. Also in map mode, there is a search bar, so you could type in an address and it will zoom into the address you select. And then we also wrote up a user guide that has a basic description of the tools I just discussed, and also includes contact information if the user needs additional help or has any inquiries. This concludes my demonstration.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna hop in with my piece. Okay, wonderful. So hopefully you've heard about these resources and you're kind of excited and interested to look into them further or potentially replicate them in your jurisdiction. What I wanted to focus on, because as planners, we always say we don't want our plans to sit on the shelf, how you can practically use these resources. So I wanted to give 3 sort of examples or case studies. So the first has to do with, planning with a capital P. I'll be speaking specifically about sort of Connecticut plans, but I think a lot of these could apply to other states as well. So our 10-year comprehensive plan for each municipality in Connecticut is called the POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development. Most POCDs directly address open space. They often have a map of, actually, I'm pretty sure all of them have open space maps. And they may talk about the type of open space that they want to acquire. They might be specific or general. And obviously, both the map and the report could be really useful to inform the open space section of the POCD. Obviously, any sort of open space plan or recreational trails planning, I don't think that needs any explanation. This is a wonderful way to feed to a municipal level resource. Although it might not be as obvious, I included a few others where I think this could just inform a piece of it. So economic development plans, like a long-term plan for Main Street, or like economic resilience and recovery plan. One of the things that NVCOG has kind of leaned into as we do a lot of our trails planning is this idea of trailside services, that when folks come to use a trail, it's really no different than other tourism. While they're there, they'll stop and get an ice cream. They may buy a water bottle and sneakers and a walking stick and things like that. And so, open space does generate economic activity. There's also connectivity to businesses through existing trails. When the communities in our region really cleaned up the Naugatuck River, and when we ended up developing a greenway trail along there, we saw businesses suddenly facing the waterfront, taking advantage of the fact that people were walking by. So, you know, maybe it's not going to be a full chapter in your economic development plan, but I do think it could inform it. For affordable housing plans, I think the real thing here is going to be the map and trying to identify areas that may not be suitable for creating new housing because they're valuable for open space. Rich showed some of those great overlays that you can use, like showing farmland soils and the wetland soils, things like natural diversity database hits, which for context basically means that at some point it was reported to the state that there was the presence of an endangered or threatened animal or plant in that general area. So it can help you kind of exclude areas for housing development. And finally, although this is not your typical plan that we think about as planners, the capital improvement plan, which is, you know, the sort of budget for municipalities, this is really important because I feel like sometimes we acquire open space as a town and then we kind of forget about it, or we just sort of leave it there. Just like the way you have to get a new fire truck every so many years or fix the roof on a building, open space needs some upkeep. And it's important to, in some cases, passively manage, in some cases, actively manage, and in some cases, actually maintain amenities on these properties. So just to recap, you get tons of open space statistics that you can incorporate in plans. You get maps and GIS data. The report narrative has a bunch of text that you can really just copy and paste right into your plans. And we have a ton of photos from this effort that you can incorporate in your plans as well. So I'll give an example here of the town of Cheshire. So Tom talked about these open space profiles. Cheshire has a ton of information here, a ton of statistics, a breakdown of open space by owner type and primary use. This is all really interesting information that could either get placed into the POCD exactly as it is or modified slightly to fit your needs. In fact, we have a town in Connecticut that just did this with their brand new POCD that got approved a few weeks ago. They took our 2-pager and put it right in there as part of the plan. Similarly, for the open space map, all the maps with ownership type have been PDF'd and put on our website. One thing we talked about is how, well, there's no real true definition of open space and we had to make some scoping decisions. If Cheshire comes back to us and says, look, for our purposes, we do consider a certain parcel to be open space, they can work with Rich and our Maps Data and Technology team and get a sort of customized version of this where we show what the municipality wants to. And finally, this is just, you don't need to read all of this, but this is a passage that we included in speaking about Cheshire's open space. This is just a total copy and paste. You can put it right in your POCD that describes sort of the general state of open space in Cheshire. The next thing is grant writing. I hope a lot of you on here are grant writers and are trying to grab as much federal and state money as you can to protect open space in your area. We hope that the report and map give you a lot of resources to draw from. Lift passages from the narrative, use the statistics. We want you to cannibalize this. Don't be shy. This is all for your use to like sort of paste together to help make a strong grant. Again, we have photos and we have some really compelling maps that can help tell your story. So we'll give an example of this. And just to note, this parcel that I'm showing in the example is totally randomly chosen. So in Waterbury, let's say we're applying for an open space acquisition grant from the state. So when we look at this map, we see, wow, pretty dense residential development in here, but not a ton of open space in the area. So I think that picture, which is worth 1,000 words there, tells a pretty striking story. As we zoom in, we can use some of the overlays that Rich had demonstrated to add some data. So we see the back of the property has wetland soils. We also see that this falls within an environmental justice block group. A quick note that for Connecticut, we're using the Connecticut state definition of environmental justice, and they have their own map. So, you know, with things changing on the federal level, I'm not exactly sure what you would want to do in your, you know, another state's version of an open space inventory. But many of our Connecticut state grants still rely on environmental justice block groups. And here's an example of like a common question you might get in a grant application. Discuss the applicant's commitment to open space. And so your answer, you might need to write a little bit of framing information, but you can just plug in all these great statistics we have from the report. Here's how many acres, here's the percentage of our land area. We've got over 100 space properties, half owned by the municipality, lots of really, really good content. And then the third thing we wanted to talk about is there's a few other extra cool things. So Erin had alluded before to the fact that we formatted our sort of inventory to align with Sustainable Connecticut Action 3.4.1. So for those who don't know, Sustainable CT is a nonprofit organization that's a voluntary certification program where municipalities can basically choose from a menu of options, complete those actions, and then get rewarded and recognized for being a sustainable community. And so to build points towards that, you can simply submit the inventory that we've already made on the regional level for your town and get points towards that with minimal modifications. The other cool thing is these municipal profiles are specifically designed to be taken out of the report. They can work as a standalone two-pager. So you can use these for marketing purposes or outreach purposes. If you're tabling at an event and you want to talk, you know, maybe your conservation commission wants to talk about the importance of open space, they've got a great two-pager here that they can hand out. Finally, we mentioned photos. The report itself has a ton of photos, but we also took a lot of extra photos that didn't make it in. We created then a gallery of all the photos we had taken and put it together, sorted it by community. And now we just have a bunch of albums available that towns can click on and take these pictures of open space that they can then incorporate into their own planning, marketing, whatever they need. And finally, there was a ton of GIS data collected and generated for this report. Like we mentioned earlier, if there's some sort of specific request that a town needs or a land trust, we've been talking mostly about municipalities, but this is also hugely useful to our land trust community. The GIS data can also be kind of customized by working with our maps data and technology team. And a request would simply need to be sent to Rich. So all that being said, thank you very much for listening to our presentation. I hope you have a lot of questions. I'll stop the share right now, and we'll give folks a little bit of time to maybe put their questions in the Q&A box.
Well, while we're waiting, I would just like to say, you know, this project took a lot of work. I'm very appreciative to the staff, to our staff that spent so much time on it and you know, really give it their all to produce what I think is a really, really useful tool, and a lot of great information that we really didn't have before that will make our planning go a lot further in the future. And I also want to thank all of our partners that are on this call that might be listening in. You know, we couldn't have done a lot of this work without the land trust and the municipal officials that helped us gather a lot of this information. So I just want to thank you all.
We did have a question about the AICP credit. I've been trying to send messages. I don't know. It says it's only going to hosts and panelists. I don't know how to send chats to everybody, so my apologies. The number for this credential is 9314916. You'll get 1 CM credit and it will count for your SNR. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Desiree, for reposting that. Okay, great. We have a question. Thank you for writing up the methodology too. Figuring out what is permanently protected or not is a big undertaking, and then translating that to GIS. Is there a update methodology in place? Who's the best person to answer that?
So for adding additional open space to the inventory, it's either contacting myself or Christine on the environmental team. And then we'll work with municipality or land trust to get it added to our database.
And also to add to that, we do include a example reporting protocol in one of the appendices in our report. Obviously, it's not going to look the same for every municipality or organization, but we kind of tried to show an example of how, you could take any new open space acquired and then send it to us. Ultimately, which we can then add to our open space inventory and share with whoever wants it.
I will also add in that we're also available to help you with open space grants. So even before you get the property, we could help you with mapping and data and running the grant.
Yeah, and Tom actually brought up a great point. I am going to, not that you need to read like every piece of this, but I'm just going to share what he was talking about. We realize that new open space information can come from a lot of different sources. Sometimes it might come to your assessor's office first from a tax perspective. Sometimes it'll come through your planning and zoning commission first. So what we tried to do here is say, here's all the different ways somebody could learn about new open space. Use a centralized tracker to share it with everybody, and then distribute it out to everyone who needs to know about this. So that was our way of trying to reconcile that every municipality has their own staffing arrangement. I do see we have another question. Do you know how many staff hours went into building this? It's excellent. Thank you so much. Certainly more than $92,000 worth because we ran through our whole grant. I don't know off the top of my head, but if I had to wager a guess, I would say we probably spent like a year and a half doing the actual work, and we had 7 employees who worked on it. Some worked as little as a couple of hours a week, and some worked more intensely, like 10 to 15 hours a week. So I think it's really tough to get that estimate, but I would say we probably pretty easily used like maybe $120,000, $130,000 of worth of staff time. Great. Well, don't be shy because we would love to fill this full hour so you can get your full 1 CM credit. So if you have any questions, maybe even not specifically about the report, but if you're thinking of doing your own open space inventory, we'd love to hear what you're having challenges with. Okay, were there any surprises as to the findings? Great question. I'll let you guys answer that one while I pull up something. I'll see.
Yes, always, every town. There's always going to be a surprise because just doing so in one of our towns, I was reviewing the GIS information for Southbury, and it happened to be a small parcel, and it was next door to what looked like a farm. And then that farm ended up having a federal Department of Agriculture restriction, and it has been since divided into 3 different parcels. So from adding a 1 acre conservation parcel added over 350 acres of protected agricultural land in town. So you never know what you're going to find.
Yeah, and with 19 different municipalities, everyone we're constantly running into things we didn't expect during our research, which, like I mentioned before, required us to go back to the drawing board sometimes and rethink, what should we consider protected and what shouldn't we for this specific inventory. So it throughout hundreds of parcels, we expected something to come up that we didn't expect, especially since this was, the first inventory in the state of this detail and scale.
Yeah, and also I think this maybe answers two questions because it goes back to Joanna's question earlier. We do have a page at the end of our report called Areas for Further Research. And so there were some things that came up that we kind of acknowledged, oh, we'd love to look into this more, but we just don't have the time. So, some of these things would be like building partnerships with the tribal community to try to identify pieces of open space that might be significant to them. Or as you saw from Tom's chart before, there are some assumptions we made. We assumed that state land would be protected, but it is an assumption at the end of the day. So that's one thing to consider. I see that Tony has asked, can you sell open space and how would that work normally? So this depends entirely upon that sort of central question that Aaron brought up about protection. So if there is a form of legal protection on the open space, it can change hands, but it generally what you'll see is something called a use restriction, which means that you cannot use it for a purpose other than open space or agriculture or recreation as listed in the deed. So if open space is not protected, it could be developed, it could be sold and then developed. There's also sometimes when we see open space sold, but not necessarily for like a nefarious purpose. So I think that, not that development is nefarious for the record, but I think that one interesting example of this is property swaps, which land trusts sometimes do. So maybe a land trust through a bequest or through a certificate of devise, they acquire this piece of property that's not super ecologically valuable, but they're happy to take it. But there is one, maybe with a smaller acreage, but with a much more ecological value that they want to take. They might sell the open space that's not as valuable to them, and it would become developed. And then they would take the more valuable one and protect that. But again, that all depends on protection. That's really the name of the game. Okay, let's see. Thank you so much for these questions, everybody. So Delia asks, or says, maybe the process could be easier if the open space is documented in a different place or in a different way upon approval or recording with the town clerk. Yes, very much agree. Tom, do you want to comment on that? Because you're the one who dealt with this the most.
Yeah, so we definitely think, overall there needs to be a centralized entity within each municipality that records any new open space. Anyone that typically finds open space in town should be reporting to that person. So they could then kind of report, either to us or whoever makes their open space map at the end of the year, ideally. So that would be my overall comment on that.
Great. Can you talk about, oh, sorry, this is from Michael. Can you talk about an example of where the original records greatly differed from what was discovered with your contemporary research? I'm not sure if we're talking, when you say original records, do you mean our previous open space map? Or do you mean, discrepancies between deeds from multiple years? I think, Rich, you might be the best suited to answer the question about changes in the map from before and after.
I mean, we've seen where especially with subdivisions and the open space set asides, that when the original subdivision was put in, it was originally one parcel. But now with the current parcel layers, the subdivision is divided into 3 to 4 different parcels. And because our inventory is parcel based, I had to split one essentially easement into 4 different easements. Let's see, any other examples of that?
From a land records perspective, one thing that we occasionally saw, which was just like such a bummer, and I didn't even know how we could address it, was sometimes you would see something that we had previously listed as open space, and then we couldn't find any deed restriction on it or any protection on the most recent deed. But sometimes you get like a bloodhound and like go back several deeds, and you'd find that it was on there somewhere, and it just got dropped off on future deeds. And as for the legality of that, that's up to the lawyers. That's not really something we can rule on. In those cases, I think we probably marked it as unprotected. But it just goes to show that land use lawyers have an important job, and making sure that it's carried over from deed to deed. That restriction is very important.
Yeah, and to that, I think, when we were looking at very old deeds, it was, and we saw, the map of the property in the land records, it didn't quite match sometimes to what the deed was saying in terms of like acreage or whatever else it described within the deed. So I think that's more of a problem of, we can't find the most up-to-date deed sometimes or easement because it's so old. And those deeds didn't get well, I wouldn't say didn't get updated, but we just couldn't find them because of the age.
I'll also add drawing in new open space when the deed refers to the old oak tree and you cannot find an old oak tree anymore. It just kind of based it on the current parcel boundaries rather than using the metrics that they use when the deed was written.
Great. So Carrie asks, did you identify encroachment into open space? And if so, how did you document and address? So that fell a little bit outside the scope of our project. We sometimes would put on the aerial imagery. We did that especially when checking for use of the property, because use is not always recorded in a deed. So if we could peek and see there's a trail on it. There were a few cases where we did see encroachments, and we, like for instance with land trusts, I would contact them and just ask, again, not trying to like start an enforcement action, but literally just asking, did you know this is happening? Was there some like land swap that we don't know about, just so we could document it properly? But since we have a few minutes left, I have kind of an interesting case study that I'd like to show you. This is super quick, but it is, I think, a really good illustration of why this can get so complicated and how easy it is to go down a rabbit hole. So, so we decide we're going to look into this one parcel of open space. Municipality has flagged it as open space. We look at the property card, and we're trying to find legal protection. So here are the encumbrances: taxes, building lines, municipal, public, private law. This is generally the space where you would find something about a deed restriction. So we don't see anything here. And interestingly, it's owned by a private sector landowner. So how is this open space? It's owned by a private party and there's no protection. So we want to look a little deeper. There's a map that's referenced, and we see this big parcel is in fact labeled open space. Labeling open space on a map is, it's something, but it's not the same as a deed protection. So we can also see that there are conservation easements on surrounding lots. So, okay, maybe that will tell us something. So we go to look up the conservation easements. They're there. They all have conservation easements, just like the map said. However, what about that large parcel in the center? So then I went to the aerial imagery to see what's going on, and boy, oh boy, that does not look like open space to me. That looks like a construction staging area for this subdivision. This imagery is from 2023, and so it was pretty clear that it was not being used for an open space purpose. And if you go back and look at imagery from 2019, it's pretty obvious that it was cleared in relation to creating this subdivision. So just out of curiosity, and this is much deeper than when I would generally go, but I really went down the rabbit hole. I went into the minutes from when this was approved, and there's a bunch of conditions of approval that have to do with sidewalks and retaining walls, and the conservation easements. But the open space set aside, which is probably a legal requirement from the subdivision regs, it's not really mentioned in here. And it looks like the developer never filed anything and went ahead and used it as a staging area. So the conclusion, the moral of that story is that it's really complicated. It's not even always enforced or known about, and legal protection can be difficult to parse out. So I hope that sort of answers your question, and shows why this project took us 2 years.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to how much detail and effort we took in trying to provide such a great resource for our region. So thank you, Christine.
What if the land you want to sell was originally bought with grant money? So I guess that depends on the type of grant. So, the probably the most popular grant for open space in Connecticut is called OSWA. And a requirement of that grant is that you file legal protection on the land when you acquire it. So in that case, it's not really the grant, it's the legal protection that comes with the grant that would prevent you from developing it. Again, you can sell, you can't develop it. But I think you would sort of need to read the T's and C's of each individual grant to see what the strings would be that are attached to it. Thank you for the question, Tony. Okay, we'll give one more minute for folks to add any other questions. If that's it, we thank you so much for a really fruitful discussion, and we hope you learned something, or at least sparked you guys thinking about something a little bit more. You can feel free to reach out to us with any questions, and for those folks from the Naugatuck+Valley, we hope to hear from you and how you're using this, and hopefully it comes in handy for you guys. Thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful Wednesday.